Hey fermenters, Austin Durant here, and welcome to another episode of Fearless Fermenting FAQ Fridays, where we answer your most burning fermentation-related questions. Today's question is, how do I ferment strawberries? Now, in most of the world right now, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, strawberries are popping, they're in season, and there are many ways, non-alcoholic ways to ferment them, and I'm going to show you some of those today. And today's format's going to be a little bit different because I actually have a new camera set up and we'll be doing some hands-on live preparation. But first, let's talk about Fermenters Club. This is something I started 15 years ago, and our mission is to teach you why and how to ferment food, as well as to create communities that are connected through our guts. So we've got a lot of free offerings. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter. We also have over 100 recipes with tips on how to get started fermentation on our website at fermentersclub.com. I've got a cookbook called Fearless Fermenting, as well as we've got self-paced online classes at academy.fermentersclub.com and lots of other stuff. Go check out the website. We sell tools, live cultures, etc. And of course, if you're here in the Southern California area, we do hands-on live workshops together. We've got one coming up on strawberries, actually, this Sunday in northern San Diego County. Again, my book, Fearless Fermenting, came out early last year, and it is available in paperback, hardcover, and on Kindle, both on Amazon. And if you want to get a signed copy from me, the author, you can go to our website at fermentersclub.com/fearless. All right. Let's get into it. So first, some fun facts about strawberries. They are a perennial plant that is in the rose family. The rose family is quite large. It contains not just strawberries, but of course roses, things like peaches, almonds, stone fruits, apples. It's a vast family, big family. And it turns out that California produces about 75 to 80% of the US's strawberries. And the berries that are on the plant are technically called accessory fruits because the seeds are actually on the outside of the fruit, as opposed to a lot of other fruits where the seed is protected in the middle. And each of those seeds is actually considered a fruit. The average strawberry has about 200 of these seeds on them. And once they are picked, the strawberries will not ripen. So it's best, of course, to pick them as close to red and ripe as possible to get the maximum amount of sweetness. Now, there are many ways to ferment strawberries. Like most fruits, however, strawberries have a higher sugar content than when you think of something more traditional that you would ferment, like cucumber pickles or cabbage. So therefore, it's important to keep in mind that the higher fruit content will attract wild yeasts to the party. And of course, if you've made things like beer and wine, you understand that yeasts are here to help us make things like alcohol. So we're going to be focusing on non-alcoholic ferments in this episode. And so we want to keep the yeasts in check, or at least slow them down as much as possible in order to promote the lactofermentation or lactic acid fermentation, which is done more by the bacteria. So there are several ways to do this. Of course, you want to use fruits. One of the things is use fruits that have a low sugar content. And we'll talk about how you can actually use green strawberries that are unripe to do that. Another strategy would be to ferment for a shorter amount of time. So for example, in the case of fruit chutneys, you really only need to ferment those for, let's say, 2 or 3 days. If you go longer than that, then you're going to start to get something that resembles something more like hooch or perhaps even cider. Another strategy to slow down the yeast activity is to actually dehydrate the fruits before you put them into a dish. And that's how we're going to make one of our dishes, strawberry sauerkraut. And of course, you also want to use these in moderation because a little goes a long way. As I like to say, during fermentation, flavors in general get amplified, so you don't really need a lot to get the effect and the flavor. All right. So strawberry sauerkraut is one of my favorite. It sounds weird, but once you make it, you'll understand. And again, the strategy is to go ahead and make your sauerkraut like you would shred up your cabbage, add your salt, and then instead of using fresh fruits or fresh berries, you want to use dehydrated fruit. And that could be something like raisins or prunes, but I've gone ahead and I've dehydrated a batch of strawberries specifically for this purpose. Now, of course, dehydrated fruits are not as charming as their fresh counterparts, but they certainly have their advantages in terms of having a longer shelf life. So I've gone ahead and pre-dehydrated this batch of fruits. So I'm actually going to go ahead and we'll make a small batch of sauerkraut. So I've got a green organic cabbage here. This is about 2 pounds. And I'm going to go ahead and shred it quickly. You can, of course, use a chef knife for the job. However, I like to employ one of these cabbage shredders whenever I'm making sauerkraut. It just makes such quick work of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my cabbage shredder. It's hard to see in the full shot here, but let's see which is a better angle. No, you can't really see. You're not going to see the action, but basically what I'm going to be doing is just scraping the cabbage down over the 3 blades here, directly into the bowl. Like I said, this will probably take about 6 or 8 passes to get this done. So as I'm going, I'm just minding the core of the cabbage, and I'm just sort of moving the cabbage around so as not to shred that part. It's okay to shred it, but it's just got a different texture, and I usually just omit the core. All right, so got most of it in the bowl here. You do want to be very careful. I recommend if you're new to one of these shredding devices that you wear protection. They make Kevlar lined gloves, so if you accidentally run your hand over the blades, it'll nick the glove and keep your fingers intact. All right, so we've got our cabbage mostly in the bowl, and like I said, this is about 2 pounds of cabbage. So when we're making sauerkraut, we do about 2% to 2.5% salt by weight. So rather than try to make you remember that number, well, another number to remember would be about 3 tablespoons of sea salt per 5 pounds of cabbage. So if we turn that into 2 pounds, it's about 1.5 tablespoons. So I'm just going to take some sea salt here and more or less kind of eyeball it, just because I've been doing this a good amount of time. So this little spoon is about a teaspoon size. So it's about 5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just going to go ahead and start to massage the cabbage. And if you've not made sauerkraut before, this is a very therapeutic exercise. Not only are you breaking down the cell walls of the cabbage, we've already done that a lot by shredding it, but by massaging it, we bring out the water that's in the cell walls. As the salt is also doing that through osmotic action. But anyway, I like to just get in here with my hands, and yeah, for about 3 minutes or so, just do a gentle massage. And you'll notice that just within a very short amount of time, what started out as dry shreds is starting to get the brine. And this is where we protect the ferment. The brine will basically be a salty liquid, and when we pack the jar of cabbage and the other ingredients down in the brine, that's where it will be safe while it ferments. So like I said, you could either salt the cabbage and just let it sit for a long period of time, maybe up to 10 or 20 minutes, or get a little more active, a little more involved, and do the shredding. And you may already be able to tell there's some dripping and a little bit of brine forming in the bowl, and that's just what we want. All right, so I'll let that sit for a little longer. Now, of course, you can add whatever other ingredients you like to your sauerkraut, or keep it simple, just as simple as salt and cabbage. Now, for this recipe, for my strawberry sauerkraut recipe, I like to add fennel seeds, maybe a little bit of fresh ginger if I've got it on hand, in addition to the berries. It adds a nice little touch. And you can find, I'll link to the strawberry sauerkraut recipe in the description below. So go ahead and check that out. So I'll let this sit for a while we go on to our next topic, and then we'll come back. So another thing that you can make with fresh strawberries is strawberry chutney, or any kind of fruit chutney. Now, fruit chutneys are a great accent for savory dishes, things like meats, also, well, any kind of dishes really. And it's essentially a combined flavor of sweet, sour, and spicy all together. And most chutneys that you experience, if you've had them out, maybe at an Indian restaurant or in Indian cuisine, are usually cooked down in order to thicken the finished product. The recipe that I do is more or less raw. So sometimes I joke and I call it it's not quite a chutney, maybe it's more like a salsa, so I call it a chalsa. So if you want something that's a little bit more traditional, you could cook it. However, strawberries, I find, they're at their best when they are fresh. So I wind up putting up, so to speak, with the fact that it's raw. So this is actually a strawberry chutney that I put up about 2 days ago. And you can see it's already got a lot of fermentation activity. Again, the recipe on that is, I'll link that in the description. It's essentially fresh strawberries that are just mashed up, and then I add raisins, maybe some garlic, or I'll do a variation where I have hot pepper. And like I said, a little bit of kombucha, a little bit of salt, and then like I said, this ferments in about 2 or 3 days. So I put this up on, let's see, it's about 2 days ago, and I just put the lid on tightly. So I want to show you, you can kind of see the lid is a little bit bulging. And that's because there's gas that's built up. So I'm going to put this next to the microphone and see if I open the lid, you can kind of maybe heard a little burp, but you can definitely see some bubbling activity. It actually does, even though it's only been 2 days, still has a little aroma. Gosh, I guess that's already a little bit boozy. But so I would give this a taste. Pretty much going to be done at this point. So like I said, that was only 2 days. It's been kind of warm here. So I will just go ahead and move this to the refrigerator. And you'll notice that there's a little bit of liquid on the bottom. Whenever you're about to use it, you can kind of just stir it up right before you serve it. So that's that one. And I also have one that I made with a little bit of jalapeno. And you can kind of see this one's probably going to have a little bit of more activity. Let's see if I'm going to go ahead and open the jar. And I'm doing it over a bowl just in case it wants to spill over. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit of activity there. And when we look into it, there's definitely some bubbling. I'm going to go ahead and grab a spoon. All right, so like I said, I would stir this up. And you can kind of see, like I said, compared to traditional chutneys, if you're used to that, it's a little more liquidy. So you could strain that out if you wanted to. And I would keep that juice and use it for something else because it's got some probiotics in it. But let me go ahead and give this a taste. That's nice. Well, again, right, just the perfect combination of sweet, sour, salty, and savory. So again, these are very ephemeral, I will say, meaning like you really want to probably consume this within a week or so. What'll happen is the sugars will continue to ferment out, and it'll become probably sour would be obviously one of the flavors, but just not as flavorful, not as strawberry-ish. So definitely maybe make a smaller batch if you're not going to use it within a week or two, but it's a lovely way to ferment your strawberries. All right. How else can we ferment strawberries? Let's take a look. You can actually ferment strawberries green. So it was kind of a trendy thing, maybe, I don't know, almost like 10 years ago now, but that's when I first learned about green strawberries and that you could pickle them. And at the time, chefs were pickling them. And so I thought, oh, if you can pickle it, you can definitely also ferment it. So that's what I done. And we've got a great grower that's here in our county, in San Diego County. And they make they're just beautiful strawberries. They have acres and acres of fields. And they're the ones that will, if you special order them, you can have them picked green. So that's what I've done here. And essentially, you're picking them when they're fully ripe, or when they're fully sized, but not fully ripe. So they're full size, but without having developed the sweetness. And in this stage, berries or any fruits will contain more starch and less sugar. And therefore, they behave really more like a vegetable, right? Like think like a cucumber or a bean. So in this case, I've got that's going to make it behave more like a pickle versus what we just saw with the chutneys, right? Where yeast are coming to the party and it's very boozy and bubbly, and this is a little more well-behaved, so to speak. So I've got a batch that that I made, as this is already pre-made. So and it's been fermenting again for about a week. So you can kind of see, and if you see in the camera, there's a good amount of bubbling activity. This is usually about a 1 to 2 week process. So I'll go ahead and these are actually ready to taste now. So go ahead and remove my fermentation lid, and there's a little bit of a fermentation weight in here to keep everything submerged. Oh yeah, it's nice and bubbly. Smells lovely. And go ahead and taste one. So you can kind of see it's just a green strawberry. I've split them depending on the size, either in half or into quarters. Wow, these are absolutely delicious and just perfect. So you want to really get them when they're still a little bit crunchy, but softened a little bit. Wow, really nice flavor. And again, you can make the brine and embellish it how you want. In the recipe that I have, I use allspice berries, a little bit of orange zest, and occasionally I'll throw in a jalapeno peppers if you want a little bit of a kick. So these are ready to go. So I will transfer these over to the refrigerator. Again, very simple to do. I'll link to the recipe in the description. So those are some different ways that we can turn this delightful spring fruit and summer fruit into something fermenty. All right, let's get back to our sauerkraut just to kind of finish that up. So what I'll do is I've got a little bit of actually caraway seed on hand, which is not quite the same as fennel, but it also works. It's also a very good traditional spice to put into sauerkraut. And I do have some fresh ginger root here. So I usually like to dice that up a little bit. And add a little bit of it to the kraut. Really, you can make the chunks as fine or as large as you want. And this is where I'm going to take a little bit, again, just a little goes a long way, of my dehydrated berries and just sprinkle them in. A little goes a long way. And then you just give it a little bit more of a massage. You can kind of see from just a few minutes ago, a lot of drippy brine now is what we want for when we pack our jar. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and pack this into a mason jar and let that ferment for probably about 2 weeks. Typically, sauerkraut takes anywhere from, I like to say, 1 to 12 weeks to ferment, and of course that largely depends upon the season and where in the world you are. Now, I've noticed that with putting fruit into sauerkraut, it tends to accelerate the process again. So maybe 10 days to 14 days, depending on where you live. But go ahead and test it, taste it every few days, and see what you think. So here is actually a batch that is complete. So I packed it into a jar. This is from about 12 days ago. So I've already gone ahead and kind of cleaned out the top part, so you can kind of see what it looks like at the end of the process. It's I also put a little bit of black pepper in this, so great flavor. I almost like to say, if there was such a thing as a sauerkraut sommelier, then I would say this would be a good breakfast kraut. But actually, just in all seriousness, you can use it at any application of sauerkraut. You wouldn't exclude it because it has the strawberries in it. Again, they add a nice flavor. It's kind of a softness, not overly sweet, and you can kind of see just the overall effect. It's not like didn't turn red or anything like that because it's just an accent. So that is your strawberry sauerkraut. One other application that we could use is, of course, to embellish something like kombucha. So you can take fresh strawberries, you can puree them up and add them to a batch of kombucha. And if you're going to do that, I would recommend, the ratio of fruit to kombucha is important because you don't want to basically make what I'll call a bottle bomb. So about 1 to 16. So if you're making, so I've got here a quart-sized bottle. And these make the best containers for doing secondary fermentation of kombucha, because this cap allows you to seal the jar or seal the bottle very tightly, and that is what allows the carbonation to build up and go into the liquid. So anyway, this is a quart size or a little over a quart size container, and so I would, using the 16:1 ratio, 32 ounces of liquid or so would be 2 ounces of juice. And that really is somewhat of, it's just a good ballpark. Now, of course, some juices from different fruits will have more sugar than others, but it's just a good benchmark to start with. So I would take 2 ounces of fresh strawberries and I would puree them using something like a stick blender. And then I would add them to my jar, and then whatever other flavor I wanted to add. One of my favorite kombucha combinations is ginger and strawberry, so I could do strawberry ginger. I've also recently done strawberry with fresh lavender petals, but really the sky's the limit, so that's up to you. So again, just follow the rules when you're making your kombucha. Depending on the weather, it usually takes anywhere from 2 to maybe 7 days if it's really cool in your house to get that secondary fermentation. So those are the many ways to ferment strawberries. If you have another way that you like to ferment strawberries, again, with the exception of things like wine or cider, I'm focusing on our food ferments, then definitely let me know about your experience with it. And again, let me know what you think, if you like this kind of stuff, or if there's something else that you want to know about. Go ahead and drop us a comment. And remember, all of our free offerings, sign up for our newsletter. Check out all of the recipes. And thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time on Fermentation Fact Friday.